He thought it was just a lucky thrift store find, a warm coat for winter. But hidden deep in the lining was something worth far more than money, and it was about to change everything. When he returned the ring, it brought him face to face with the woman he once loved, now one of the richest people in the state. Their reunion could have been a second chance at happiness, until a child's innocent whisper to a powerful man stopped the gala cold. Now, secrets long buried are clawing their way to the surface, and someone will do anything to keep them hidden. He's fighting to protect the people he loves, while the world decides if he's a hero or a fraud. But when the truth finally comes out, will it set them free or destroy them all? Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. The December wind whipped off Lake Michigan, cutting through Danny Brooks's thin jacket like it was made of paper. His ears stung in the morning cold as he walked beside his granddaughter Maya down Cedar Harbor's sleepy streets. Christmas decorations hung limp and frozen on the lampposts, their tinsel barely twinkling in the weak winter light. "You sure you don't want me to grab you a warmer coat from the church donation box?" Maya asked, pulling her own second-hand parka tighter around her shoulders. Her backpack was covered in patches and pins she'd collected over the years, each one telling its own story. Danny shook his head, a small smile creasing his weathered face. "I'm fine, kiddo. Been through worse in the army." But he couldn't help rubbing his hands together for warmth as they waited at the crosswalk. Maya gave him a look that was far too knowing for her 13 years. "Grandpa, being cold in the past doesn't make you less cold now." "When did you get so smart?" Danny chuckled, ruffling her dark hair. The gesture made her duck away with a grin, but he caught the worry in her eyes. She'd been doing that more lately, watching him like she was afraid he might disappear. They passed the row of shuttered summer shops, their windows dark and empty until tourist season returned. Danny's breath came out in white puffs as he quickened his pace. He couldn't be late for his morning shift driving the senior center shuttle. "Got your art project ready for today?" he asked, changing the subject. Maya's face lit up. "Almost done. Mrs. Chin says my winter scene might make it into the school showcase." She pulled out her sketchbook, flipping to a half-finished drawing of the harbor in snow. Even in pencil, the piece captured the quiet beauty of their lakeside town. "That's my girl," Danny said softly, pride warming his chest despite the cold. Maya had inherited her mother's talent with a pencil, along with her keen eye for detail. Some days it hurt to see how much she looked like Sarah, especially when she was lost in her art. They reached the middle school just as the first bell rang. Other students rushed past them, their boots crunching on the salt-covered sidewalk. Maya hesitated before heading inside. "You'll pick me up after art club?" she asked, though she knew the answer. They went through this routine every day. 3:30 sharp, Danny promised, right after I finished the afternoon routes. Maya nodded and gave him a quick hug before running inside. Danny watched until she disappeared through the heavy doors, then checked his watch. If he hurried, he could make it to the senior center in time for his first pickup. The day passed in a blur of steering wheels and friendly conversations with his elderly passengers. Between his morning shuttle route and his afternoon maintenance work at the community center, Danny barely had time to notice the growling in his stomach. He'd skipped lunch again, saving the money for Maya's art supplies. By evening, his shoulders ached from the long day as he climbed the stairs to their small apartment above the hardware store. The smell of pasta greeted him. Maya had started dinner using the last of their spaghetti and sauce. "You didn't have to cook," Danny said, hanging up his thin jacket. "You always cook," Maya replied, stirring the pot with the confidence of someone who'd learned to be self-sufficient too young. "Besides, I finished my homework early." They ate at their small kitchen table, sharing stories about their day. Maya talked about her art teacher's praise, while Danny described how Mrs. Rodriguez from the senior center had taught him to say thank you in Spanish. After dinner, while Maya worked on her drawing, Danny remembered the paper bag he'd picked up from the thrift store during his lunch break. He'd spotted the navy peacoat in the window and couldn't believe the $7 price tag. It looked warm, almost new, a rare find. He pulled the coat from the bag, admiring the thick wool and brass buttons. As he ran his hands over the lining, his fingers caught on something strange, a small bump in the silk. Curious, he felt along the seam until he found a hidden pocket, carefully sewn into the lining. Danny's mechanic's fingers worked carefully, gently pulling at the stitches until they gave way. Inside, he found a small velvet pouch, its deep purple fabric soft with age. His heart began to thud as he loosened the drawstring. Something heavy fell into his palm, a ring that caught the kitchen light and threw it back in brilliant blue sparkles. The platinum band held a cornflower sapphire, its facets clear and bright despite the years it must have spent hidden away. Turning it in his fingers, Danny noticed an inscription inside the band, E+D, Psalm 27. He stared at the ring, suddenly aware of the weight of history in his hand. This wasn't just a piece of jewelry. It was someone's treasure, someone's story, someone's love tucked away and forgotten in a thrift store coat. His heart pounded as he held it under the kitchen light, wondering how such a precious thing had found its way to him. Danny's mop swished across the church hall's worn linoleum in steady strokes, but his mind was elsewhere. The velvet pouch in his jacket pocket seemed to weigh 100 pounds. Every few minutes, his hand would drift to check. It was still there. The platinum ring with its brilliant blue sapphire safely tucked away. Morning light filtered through the stained glass windows, casting colored patterns across the freshly cleaned floor. The familiar scent of pine cleaner filled the air, mixing with the lingering traces of yesterday's coffee hour. "You're awfully quiet this morning, Danny," Pastor Ruth's voice made him start. She stood in the doorway, a ceramic mug steaming in her hands. Her silver hair caught the light, and her kind eyes held a hint of concern. "Just thinking," Danny replied, continuing his methodical mopping. "Must be some pretty heavy thinking. You've cleaned that same spot 3 times now." There was gentle humor in her voice as she stepped carefully onto the dry section of floor. Danny stopped, leaning on his mop handle. "Found something yesterday, in that thrift store coat I bought." He reached into his pocket and pulled out the velvet pouch. Pastor Ruth set her coffee down on a nearby folding table and adjusted her reading glasses as Danny carefully tipped the ring into his palm. Her eyes widened. "Oh my," she breathed, leaning closer. "That's quite a find." "There's an inscription," Danny said, turning the ring so she could see the tiny engraving inside the band. E+D, Psalm 27. "The Lord is my light and my salvation," Pastor Ruth quoted softly. "Whom shall I fear?" She straightened up, her expression thoughtful. "Have you reported it?" Danny shook his head. "Wanted to talk to you first. Feels like." He paused, searching for the right words. "Like it means something to somebody. More than just money, you know?" Pastor Ruth nodded, picking up her coffee again. "Let me check our old records. That inscription style. It reminds me of something from years back." She headed toward her office, then turned back. "Come on, Danny, the floor can wait." The pastor's office was a cozy space lined with books and filing cabinets. Photos of church events through the years covered one wall, faces young and old smiling out from wooden frames. Pastor Ruth settled behind her desk and pulled out a thick, leather-bound donation ledger. "What made you think of the records?" Danny asked, watching as she carefully turned the yellowed pages. "That sapphire?" she replied, not looking up. "Someone donated a similar one for our building fund renovation? Must be." She ran her finger down a column of neat handwriting. "Yes, here it is. 23 years ago. Eleanor Whitmore." Danny's heart skipped a beat. "Whitmore? As in the foundation?" "Mm-hmm." Pastor Ruth looked up, her eyes distant with memory. "Eleanor used to come to youth group here, back when her father was still alive. Quiet girl, but kind. Always helping with the little ones." She tilted her head, studying Danny's face. "You would have been here then too, come to think of it." A flash of memory hit Danny. A girl with honey-colored hair sitting under the maple tree in the churchyard, reading to the Sunday school kids. He pushed the thought away. "The Whitmore Foundation has their main office downtown," Pastor Ruth continued. "They do wonderful work with youth programs, housing assistance." She closed the ledger carefully. "Might be worth taking the ring there, see if there's a connection." Danny ran a hand through his gray hair, suddenly feeling nervous. The Whitmore Foundation took up half a city block, all glass and polished stone. What would they think of him, walking in off the street with a ring from a second-hand coat? "I can go with you," Pastor Ruth offered, reading his hesitation. Danny straightened his shoulders, a habit from his army days. "No, I can manage, after my shift at the shuttle." He carefully tucked the velvet pouch back into his pocket. "Better finish that floor first, though." "Danny," Pastor Ruth called as he reached the door. He turned back. "You're doing the right thing." He nodded, managing a small smile. The ring felt both lighter and heavier in his pocket as he went back to his mop, his mind now full of glass buildings and honey-colored hair from long ago. Danny stood in the gleaming lobby of the Whitmore Foundation, feeling distinctly out of place. The pressed navy peacoat, freshly dry-cleaned with his last few dollars, did little to mask his discomfort among the polished marble floors and artistic light fixtures that seemed to float like clouds beneath the soaring ceiling. He pulled Maya's drawing from his pocket, carefully unfolding the paper. Her artistic talent showed even in this simple sketch. A four-leaf clover with a tiny smiling face, the words, "Good luck, Grandpa," written in her neat handwriting. The corners of his mouth lifted despite his nervousness. At the circular reception desk, a young woman with perfectly styled hair looked up from her computer screen. "Welcome to the Whitmore Foundation. How may I help you?" Danny cleared his throat. "I'm here to see Miss Whitmore. About a personal matter." He reached into his coat pocket, touching the velvet pouch for reassurance. The receptionist's professional smile didn't waver. "Do you have an appointment?" "No, ma'am, but it's important. It's about something that belonged to her mother." Her eyebrows lifted slightly. She picked up her phone, had a brief whispered conversation, then looked back at Danny. "Someone will be down shortly. Please have a seat." Danny settled into one of the modern leather chairs, its chrome frame gleaming. The wall behind him displayed photographs of community projects, a new children's hospital wing, a youth center, elderly care facilities. Each image showed smiling faces, hope made visible. A few minutes later, the elevator doors opened with a soft chime. A woman in a tailored charcoal suit approached, her heels clicking purposefully on the marble. "I'm Sarah Chin, Ms. Whitmore's executive assistant. You mentioned something about her mother?" Danny stood, straightening his coat. "Yes, I found something that I believe belonged to her." He withdrew the velvet pouch. "There's an inscription inside." Sarah's eyes narrowed slightly, but her tone remained professional. "May I?" She held out her hand. Danny hesitated, then carefully placed the pouch in her palm. She opened it, examining the ring with sharp attention. After a moment, she handed it back. "Wait here, please." The minutes ticked by slowly. Danny studied the artwork on the walls, modern pieces in soft blues and greens. His fingers traced the edge of Maya's drawing in his pocket. The familiar texture of the paper grounded him. The elevator chimed again. Danny turned, and his heart seemed to skip a beat. Eleanor Whitmore stood before him, as elegant as the building itself in a cream silk blouse and pencil skirt. But it was her eyes that caught him. The same warm brown he remembered from decades ago, now crinkled slightly at the corners. Her silver-streaked hair was swept back in a simple knot, and she wore minimal jewelry, just small pearl earrings and a delicate watch. "Danny Brooks," she said softly, and his name in her voice brought back summer evenings and youth group meetings and shared dreams that had scattered like leaves in autumn wind. "Eleanor." He managed a slight smile. "You look well." "So do you." Her gaze was direct, taking in his pressed coat and carefully combed hair. "Sarah said you found something of my mother's?" Danny nodded, withdrawing the pouch once more. "In a thrift store coat I bought. It was sewn into the lining." He held it out to her. "The inscription made me think it might be important." Eleanor opened the pouch with careful fingers. When the ring slipped into her palm, her breath caught audibly. "Oh," she whispered. Her composure wavered for just a moment as she traced the sapphire with a fingertip. "I never thought I'd see this again." She looked up at him, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "My father gave this to my mother when they were young." She used to say it gave her courage, that the blue reminded her of heaven watching over her. Eleanor's voice grew softer. "When she died, I wore it on a chain. But then it disappeared during a move, and She trailed off, closing her fingers gently around the ring. "Pastor Ruth helped me track down where it might have come from," Danny explained. "When she mentioned your name, I remembered you used to wear a ring on a chain, back in youth group." Eleanor's smile held a touch of wonder. "You remembered that?" "I remember a lot of things," Danny said simply. She studied him for a moment, then gestured toward the elevator. "Would you join me for coffee in my office? I'd like to hear how you've been." In her corner office, floor-to-ceiling windows offered a view of the harbor. A coffee station occupied one corner, and comfortable chairs were arranged around a low table. It felt less formal than Danny had expected, with family photos on the desk and children's artwork framed on one wall. Eleanor prepared 2 cups of coffee with practiced ease. "Still take it black?" she asked, and Danny nodded, surprised she remembered. They sat, the ring resting between them on the table. Eleanor added a splash of cream to her cup. "Maya's artwork?" she asked, nodding toward the paper peeking from his pocket. "My granddaughter," Danny said, a note of pride creeping into his voice. "She's 13, quite the artist." You're a grandfather. Eleanor's smile was genuine. That suits you somehow. Are you still in Cedar Harbor? Never left. Drive the senior shuttle part-time. Do maintenance work at New Hope Church. He sipped his coffee. Maya lives with me now. Her mom, my daughter Sarah, passed 3 years ago. Oh, Danny, I'm so sorry. Eleanor's hand moved as if to reach for his, then settled back on her cup. Their conversation flowed easier than he'd expected, memories mixing with careful questions about the present. Eleanor's laugh was still the same, warm and quick, like sunshine breaking through clouds. They talked about Pastor Ruth, still going strong at New Hope, and Eleanor's work with the foundation. I can't thank you enough for bringing this back, Eleanor said finally, lifting the ring. It means more than I can say. She paused, then added, let me at least reimburse you for the coat. Danny shook his head. No need, just glad it found its way home. Danny's keys scraped in the lock of their small apartment as the sun was setting, painting the hallway in warm orange light. The familiar smell of boiling pasta and jarred marinara sauce greeted him as he stepped inside. Maya stood at the stove, wooden spoon in hand, her dark hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. So? She called out, not turning around. Did you meet the billionaire lady? Danny hung his coat carefully on the hook by the door, smoothing out a wrinkle. I did, and she's not what you'd expect. Maya turned down the heat under the pot and faced him, eyes sparkling with curiosity. What do you mean? Was she wearing like a diamond tiara? Actually, Danny said, settling onto one of their mismatched kitchen chairs, she was wearing a simple blue sweater and pearl earrings, regular clothes, just expensive-looking regular clothes. Did she cry when you gave her the ring? Maya stirred the pasta with extra vigor. No crying, Danny chuckled. But she was touched. It belonged to her mother, just like we thought. She kept touching it, looking at it like she couldn't believe it was real. Maya drained the pasta in their old colander, steam rising around her face. Did she try to give you a reward? $1 million? A yacht? Maya Brooks, you've been watching too many movies. Danny got up to help her with the sauce. She offered, but I told her finding the rightful owner was reward enough. Grandpa, Maya groaned, spooning sauce over her pasta. We could have gotten a new car, one where the heater actually works. Hey now, Danny protested, reaching for the Parmesan cheese. That car has character. They settled at their small kitchen table, where a stack of Maya's homework had been pushed to one side. The pasta was slightly overcooked, but Danny didn't mind. He'd eaten far worse during his army days. So what did you talk about? Maya twirled spaghetti around her fork. In her fancy office? Danny paused, memories of that afternoon washing over him. Eleanor's office had been surprisingly cozy, walls lined with books, photographs of community projects, and a large window overlooking the city. They'd sat in comfortable chairs while an assistant brought them coffee in delicate cups. We talked about the old days, actually, he said carefully. Turns out, we knew each other back in high school. She used to come to youth group at New Hope Church. Maya's fork clattered against her plate. Wait, what? You knew her when you were young? How come you never told me? It was a long time ago, sweetheart. Different lives. Danny took a sip of water, hoping Maya wouldn't press for details. But of course she did. She was 13 and naturally curious about everything. Was she nice back then too? Did you guys hang out? Danny smiled despite himself, remembering Eleanor's laugh when he'd mentioned the maple tree where they used to meet after school. She was very nice, smart, always helping people. Even then, we were friends. Maya narrowed her eyes, studying his face with that perceptive look that sometimes made him wonder if she could read minds. Just friends? That's ancient history, Danny said firmly, standing to clear his plate. What matters is the ring found its way home. Maya helped him wash the dishes, but she wasn't done with her questions. Did she remember you right away? Danny thought about the moment of recognition in Eleanor's eyes, how her professional mask had softened into something more real. She did. Said I hadn't changed much, except for the gray hair. You're not that gray, Maya protested loyally. Just distinguished, like that actor in the movie we watched last week. Danny laughed, flicking soap bubbles at her. Now you're just trying to make your old grandpa feel better. They were just finishing up the dishes when something slid under their front door with a soft whisper. Maya darted over to pick it up. Grandpa? She exclaimed, holding up a cream-colored envelope. It's got the Whitmore Foundation logo on it. Danny dried his hands slowly, trying to calm his suddenly racing heart. The envelope was thick, expensive paper, addressed to Mr. Daniel Brooks and Miss Maya Brooks in elegant script. Maya bounced on her toes as he carefully opened it. Inside was an invitation, the gold lettering catching the light. The Whitmore Foundation cordially invites you to attend our annual Winter Gala. Are we going? Maya's eyes were wide with excitement. Please say we're going. Danny looked at his granddaughter's hopeful face, then back at the invitation. The gala was in 2 days. He thought about his one good suit, probably too tight now, and Maya's lack of formal wear. He thought about feeling out of place among wealthy donors and society people. But then he remembered Eleanor's kind eyes, the way she'd said, "I'd love to show Maya our youth art program." She'd mentioned it casually, but he'd caught the genuine interest when he told her about Maya's drawing. The invitation trembled slightly in his hands. 2 worlds were about to collide, and he wasn't sure if he was ready for what that might mean. Maya was still watching him, practically vibrating with anticipation. "Grandpa?" He looked at the invitation again, at their names written so carefully on the envelope. Whatever came next, he couldn't deny his granddaughter this chance at something extraordinary. "Well," he said, smiling at Maya's eager face, "I guess we better figure out what to wear to a gala." The morning light filtered through the thrift shop's dusty windows, casting long shadows across racks of secondhand clothes. Danny pushed open the familiar door, its bell chiming softly above him. The store smelled of old books and laundered fabric, a comforting scent he'd known since Maya first came to live with him. Pastor Ruth stood behind the counter, sorting through a box of donated items. Her silver hair caught the light as she looked up, a knowing smile spreading across her face. "Well, if it isn't our very own fairy tale hero," she said, adjusting her reading glasses. "I heard your meeting with Eleanor went well." Danny felt his ears grow warm. News travels fast in Cedar Harbor. Small towns, big hearts, loose lips. Pastor Ruth chuckled. She reached beneath the counter and pulled out a cardboard box. "I've been waiting for you." "Oh?" Danny raised an eyebrow, stepping closer. "Can't have you going to a fancy foundation gala without proper attire?" She began rifling through the box, her hands moving with purpose. "Someone donated these last week, practically new." She pulled out several ties, laying them carefully on the counter. They were indeed in good condition, though clearly pre-owned. One caught Danny's eye, a deep navy silk with subtle diagonal stripes. "That's too much, Pastor Ruth. I just came to say thank you for your help with the ring." "Daniel Brooks," she said, using his full name the way she did when she wouldn't take no for an answer. "Accepting kindness isn't the same as accepting charity. Besides, these ties need a good home." Danny ran his fingers over the navy silk. It reminded him of his service dress uniform from his army days. "Maya did say I needed to look presentable." "Smart girl, that granddaughter of yours." Pastor Ruth pushed the tie toward him. "She gets that wisdom from somewhere, you know." Danny cleared his throat, emotion suddenly thick in his voice. "Her mother, Sarah, was always the clever one." Pastor Ruth's face softened. "She was, and she'd be so proud of how you've raised Maya." She paused, studying him. "Sarah would want you to have some happiness too, Danny." He focused on the tie, avoiding her gentle gaze. "Maya's happiness is what matters." "They're not mutually exclusive," Pastor Ruth said quietly. She began folding the other ties, giving him a moment to compose himself. "Eleanor asked about you, you know, years ago, after you'd both gone your separate ways." Danny's head snapped up. "She did?" "Mm-hmm. Right before she left for college." Pastor Ruth's hand stayed busy with the ties. "She wanted to know if you'd joined the army like you'd planned, if you were doing okay." "That was a lifetime ago," Danny said, but his voice held a note of wonder. "The heart has a long memory," Pastor Ruth replied simply. She pushed the navy tie into his hands. "Now take this, and remember, sometimes God's gifts come wrapped in thrift store paper." Danny slipped the tie into his pocket, touched by her kindness. "Thank you, Pastor Ruth, for everything. Just promise me one thing," she called as he headed for the door. "When you're at that fancy gala, remember who you are. A good man who works hard and loves his granddaughter. That's worth more than any foundation's bank account." The rest of the day passed in a blur of shuttle routes and maintenance checks. Danny's evening shift at the community center ended early, giving him time to prepare for tomorrow's gala. At home, he found Maya in her room, carefully laying out her best dress, a dark green velvet number they'd found at this same thrift store last Christmas. "Does it still fit?" he asked from the doorway. Maya held the dress up against herself. "I think so. I haven't grown much since December. She smoothed the fabric carefully. What are you wearing? Danny went to his room and returned with the peacoat draped over his arm. This, with my black pants and that white shirt from Uncle Jim's wedding? And? Maya prompted. He pulled the navy tie from his pocket. Pastor Ruth insisted. It's perfect, Maya exclaimed, running her fingers over the silk. You'll look like a real gentleman. As opposed to a fake one? Danny teased, but he was pleased by her approval. They spent the next hour preparing their clothes for tomorrow. Danny ironed his shirt while Maya polished her only pair of dress shoes. The peaceful domesticity of the moment settled over them both, though underneath ran a current of excitement. In his room, Danny smoothed the peacoat's sleeves, marveling at how a simple thrift store purchase had led to all this. His fingers traced the spot where the ring had been hidden, and he felt a nervous thrill run through him. Tomorrow, he would step into Eleanor's world, a world of marble floors and crystal chandeliers. But Pastor Ruth's words echoed in his mind. Remember who you are. He hung the coat carefully, positioning it next to his pressed shirt and new tie. Maya appeared in his doorway, now in her pajamas, her face scrubbed clean. Grandpa, she said softly, are you nervous about tomorrow? Danny turned to look at his granddaughter, so perceptive, so much like her mother. A little, he admitted. You? She nodded. But excited too, like Christmas Eve but scarier. Come here, he said, opening his arms. She stepped into his embrace, and he hugged her close. Whatever happens tomorrow, we've got each other. That's what matters. Maya squeezed him tight before pulling away. Good night, Grandpa. Don't stay up too late worrying. Good night, sweetheart. Sweet dreams. After she left, Danny stood for a long moment, looking at his laid-out clothes. The peacoat's navy fabric seemed to hold all the possibility of tomorrow within its folds. He ran his hand over the sleeves one last time, smoothing an invisible wrinkle, feeling that nervous thrill again. The Whitmore Foundation's grand hall sparkled under a canopy of twinkling lights. Crystal chandeliers cast warm reflections across polished marble floors, and the gentle notes of a string quartet floated through the air. Danny stood near a Roman-style pillar, tugging at his borrowed navy tie. The peacoat that had started it all hung neatly in the coat room, replaced by a blazer he'd found at the back of his closet. Maya twirled near the dessert table, her second-hand party dress catching the light. She'd spent an hour curling her hair with borrowed rollers from their neighbor, and now it bounced as she sampled tiny chocolate eclairs. The sight of her happiness made his chest tight. Your granddaughter seems to be enjoying herself, Eleanor said, appearing beside him in an elegant blue dress. Her mother's ring gleamed on her right hand, its sapphire matching her outfit perfectly. She's in heaven. Danny chuckled. Though I should probably cut her off before the sugar rush hits. Let her be. Eleanor smiled. It's not every day a young artist gets to see her work displayed in a gallery. Danny followed her gaze to where Maya's drawings hung in the youth art section. His granddaughter had insisted on contributing 3 pieces, including a detailed sketch of the sapphire ring that had brought them here. Across the room, Rosa Martinez moved efficiently between guests with a tray of champagne flutes. Her uniform was crisp and professional, but Danny noticed how she kept her eyes down, speaking only when spoken to. Her son Tommy sat quietly in a corner near the kitchen entrance, coloring in a book Eleanor had given him. Mr. Hargreaves certainly knows how to work a room, Eleanor observed, nodding toward the center of the hall. Clayton Hargreaves stood surrounded by admirers, his $1,000 suit and camera-ready smile on full display. He gestured animatedly, drawing laughs from the small crowd of donors and board members, hanging on his every word. Guy reminds me of a car salesman I knew back in Detroit, Danny muttered. Sold lemons with a smile. Eleanor's lips twitched. Clay does have a certain polish to him. The donors love it. The string quartet finished their piece, and applause rippled through the room. Maya bounded over, her cheeks flushed with excitement and sugar. Grandpa, Mrs. Whitmore, you have to try these tiny lemon tarts. She held up a small pastry. They're like sunshine in your mouth. That's quite a review, Eleanor laughed. I'll have to tell our caterer. Danny noticed Tommy had left his coloring corner and was now wandering through the crowd, his small face curious as he watched the adults in their fancy clothes. Rosa appeared to have noticed too. She set down her tray and started moving toward him, but a guest stopped her with a request. The Foundation's youth programs are really something special, Danny said, watching Maya chat animatedly with a young violinist from the quartet. Maya hasn't stopped talking about the art classes since you mentioned them. We try to create opportunities, Eleanor replied, though sometimes I wonder if we're doing enough. She paused, watching Clayton work the room. Some of our board members are more interested in photo ops than actual change. Tommy continued his quiet exploration of the party, weaving between elegant gowns and pressed suits. He stopped near Clayton's group, his wide eyes taking in the man's animated gestures and booming laugh. Danny saw Rosa finally break free from the guest who detained her. She started moving quickly but carefully through the crowd, trying not to draw attention. But Tommy had already reached up and tugged on Clayton's sleeve. The conversation in the group paused. Clayton looked down, his practiced smile firmly in place. "Well, hello there, young man. Are you lost?" The room seemed to quiet, or maybe it was just Danny's perception as he watched the scene unfold. Tommy's clear, innocent voice carried in the sudden lull between musical numbers. "Mommy says you're my daddy." The silence that followed felt like a physical thing. Clayton's smile froze, then flickered. Several guests stepped back, creating a small space around the man and child. Champagne glasses paused halfway to lips. The string quartet's next piece faltered before it began. Rosa reached them then, her face drained of color. Her hands trembled as she gripped Tommy's shoulders. "I'm so sorry, Mr. Hargreaves, he's just confused. Children say such silly things." Two security guards materialized seemingly from nowhere, their faces professionally blank. "Ma'am, why don't we step into the office? We can sort out this misunderstanding." Danny took a step forward, but Eleanor's hand touched his arm, holding him back. Her face had gone carefully neutral, but he could feel the tension in her light grip. Rosa clutched Tommy to her side as the guards escorted them away from the main hall. The boy looked confused, his small voice carrying back. "But Mommy, you said—" The heavy doors closed behind them, cutting off his words. Clayton recovered quickly, letting out a practiced laugh that seemed to break the spell over the room. "Well, children and their imaginations, am I right?" He raised his champagne glass. "Now, as I was saying about our latest development project," the crowd slowly began to return to their conversations, though Danny noticed several people whispering behind their hands, throwing glances toward the doors where Rosa and Tommy had disappeared. The string quartet finally began their next piece, the music slightly too loud, as if trying to cover the lingering discomfort in the air. Maya appeared at Danny's side, clutching his hand. She'd seen enough in her young life to recognize when something was wrong. "Grandpa, is Tommy okay?" Danny squeezed her hand, feeling Eleanor's grip tighten slightly on his other arm. "I hope so, sweetheart," he said quietly. "I hope so." Danny's kitchen was quiet, except for the soft hum of the old radio and the gentle clink of his coffee mug against the worn formica table. Morning sunlight streamed through the window, catching dust motes in its golden beams. He'd gotten up early, unable to sleep after the events of last night's gala. The radio's morning news buzzed in the background while he stirred a second spoonful of sugar into his coffee. Maya was still asleep, exhausted from the late night and sugar crash that had followed. And in local news, the radio announcer's voice suddenly cut through his thoughts. Controversy erupted at last night's Whitmore Foundation gala when Danny's hand froze mid-stir. The story that followed made his stomach drop. According to the Cedar Harbor Daily, a former custodian who recently claimed to have found a valuable family heirloom caused further drama when he reached for his phone, fingers trembling slightly as he pulled up the local news website. There it was, splashed across the screen in bold letters. "Custodian crasher claims heirloom, causes paternity scene." The coffee turned bitter in his mouth as he read further. The article twisted everything, painted him as an opportunist who'd somehow engineered both the ring's discovery and the incident with Rosa's son. They'd even dug up his employment history, noting his 2 jobs and modest apartment as if they were evidence of desperation rather than honest work. A soft knock at the door made him jump. Maya appeared in the hallway, rubbing sleep from her eyes. "Grandpa? Someone's here." Danny opened the door to find Eleanor standing there. Her usual polished appearance replaced by simple jeans and a sweater. Her face was tight with concern, and behind her stood Rosa, wrapped in a plain coat, eyes red-rimmed from crying. "May we come in?" Eleanor asked quietly. Danny stepped back, gesturing them inside. Maya, sensing the tension, disappeared back to her room without being asked. "I'm so sorry about this, Danny," Eleanor said as they settled around the kitchen table. She pulled out her tablet, showing him not just the local article, but several others that had picked up the story. "Clayton's PR team works fast. They're trying to get ahead of the story by discrediting you both." Rosa sat with her hands clasped tightly in her lap, her shoulders hunched as if trying to make herself smaller. "It's my fault," she whispered. "I should never have let Tommy near him." "None of this is your fault," Eleanor said firmly, reaching over to cover Rosa's trembling hands with her own. "Danny, there's something you need to know." Rosa lifted her eyes to meet Danny's. 3 years ago, I worked as a housekeeper at the Harbor View Hotel. Clayton Hargreaves stayed there often for business. Her voice grew softer. He was charming at first. Said he noticed how hard I worked. Offered me extra shifts, better pay. Danny's jaw tightened as he began to understand where this was going. "When I found out I was pregnant," Rosa continued, "he had his lawyers bring papers. An NDA, non-disclosure agreement. They said if I signed it and kept quiet, they would make sure Tommy and I were taken care of. But the money they promised," she shook her head, "it was never enough to live on. Just enough to keep us quiet." Eleanor's expression had hardened. Clayton has a pattern of this behavior. His lawyers are very good at making problems disappear. But this time, she pulled out another document from her bag. "This is a copy of the NDA Rosa signed. My legal team has been reviewing it, and we think we've found some irregularities that might void it." Danny looked between the two women, anger building in his chest. Not for himself, but for Rosa and her little boy. For all the others who might have signed similar papers out of fear and desperation. "The article," he said slowly, "making me look like some kind of con man. That's to discredit me in case I try to speak up for Rosa?" Eleanor nodded grimly. "Clayton knows I've taken an interest in you. He's trying to isolate anyone who might support Rosa if she decides to come forward. My reputation might protect me, but he has no problem destroying others to keep his secrets." Rosa wiped at her eyes with the back of her hand. "I never wanted any of this. I just wanted Tommy to have a chance at a good life. But last night, when he saw Clayton..." She drew a shaky breath. "Children don't understand about NDAs and secrets. They just know their truth. And now Clayton's trying to bury that truth under lies about Danny?" Eleanor added, anger flashing in her eyes. "He's used this playbook before. Discredit, distract, make the victim look like the villain. But this time, he's made a mistake." Danny reached across the table to squeeze Rosa's hand. "You're not alone anymore," he said quietly. "Whatever you decide to do, you have people on your side now." "That's why I brought her here," Eleanor said. "Danny, you're one of the most honest people I know. Your reputation in this community, the way you've raised Maya, people trust you. Clayton can try to paint you as an opportunist, but anyone who knows you will see through that." Rosa straightened slightly in her chair, some of the fear leaving her eyes as she looked between Danny and Eleanor. For the first time since she'd entered the apartment, a glimmer of hope showed on her face. The evening shadows stretched long across Pastor Ruth's cozy living room as she ushered Danny, Eleanor, and Rosa through the side door of the parsonage. The old Victorian house creaked softly under their feet as they made their way to the kitchen, where a pot of chamomile tea waited on the sturdy oak table. Rosa's hands trembled as she accepted a steaming mug, her eyes darting occasionally to the curtained windows. Tommy was asleep in the next room, curled up on the pastor's plaid couch with his favorite toy truck clutched to his chest. "You're safe here," Pastor Ruth assured her, settling into her usual chair at the head of the table. The warm yellow light from the overhead lamp cast a gentle glow on her silver hair. "No reporters, no cameras, just friends." Eleanor sat straight-backed in her chair, but her usual polished demeanor had softened. She'd changed from her business attire into a simple sweater and slacks. "Rosa, please tell Danny what you told me earlier. He needs to understand what we're up against." Rosa's fingers tightened around the warm mug. "I worked at Clayton's hotel 3 years ago," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. He would come to inspect the properties late at night, always alone." She swallowed hard. "When I found out I was pregnant, he made me sign papers. Said if I ever told anyone, he would make sure I was deported." Danny's jaw clenched. The man he'd seen at the gala, with his expensive suit and practiced smile, had seemed so untouchable. Now that carefully crafted image was cracking, revealing something ugly underneath. "The NDA she signed is full of holes," Eleanor added, pulling out a folder. "My legal team reviewed it this afternoon, but Clayton has connections in immigration enforcement. He's already proved he's willing to use them." Pastor Ruth reached over and patted Rosa's hand. "You did nothing wrong, dear. Sometimes staying quiet is how we survive. But now you have people standing with you. The press is already trying to paint this as my fault," Danny said, running a hand through his gray hair. "They're saying I planned this whole thing, finding the ring, coming to the gala, like it was some kind of setup." Eleanor's eyes flashed. That's Clayton's doing. He's trying to discredit anyone who might support Rosa. Make it look like we're all part of some conspiracy against him. My Tommy? Rosa whispered, tears welling in her eyes. He didn't mean to cause trouble. He sees Clayton sometimes on TV, and he gets excited. He doesn't understand. Children have a way of speaking truth, Pastor Ruth observed quietly, even when adults don't want to hear it. Danny thought of Maya, of how fiercely he'd always protected her. The thought of someone threatening her the way Clayton was threatening Rosa and Tommy made his blood boil. What do you need me to do? Eleanor leaned forward. Help me build a case. There are probably other women like Rosa, other NDAs, other cover-ups. You work in these buildings. People trust you. They might tell you things they'd never tell me. It could get ugly, Pastor Ruth warned. Clayton won't go down without a fight. He'll try to destroy anyone who threatens him. He's already trying to destroy my reputation, Danny said. But I've got nothing to hide. He looked at Rosa, at the fear and hope warring in her eyes. Besides, some things matter more than reputation. Eleanor reached across the table and squeezed his hand. The gesture was simple, but it carried the weight of their shared history, of young love and hard choices, and finding each other again in this moment of crisis. We'll need to be careful, Pastor Ruth said. Strategic. I can reach out to my contacts in other churches, find safe places for Rosa and Tommy if things get worse. Eleanor, your foundation has resources we can use. And Danny. She smiled at him. You've always had a way of getting to the truth of things. Rosa wiped her eyes. Why would you all risk so much? For us? Because it's right, Danny said simply. He thought of the ring that had started all this, a symbol of love and courage that had brought him back into Eleanor's orbit. Maybe it wasn't just chance. Maybe this was where he was meant to be, standing up against injustice with people he trusted. Eleanor nodded. Clayton thinks his money makes him untouchable. He's used to people backing down, staying quiet. But he's never faced people willing to stand together. Then that's what we'll do, Danny said firmly. Stand together, whatever it costs. The kitchen grew quiet, except for the gentle ticking of Pastor Ruth's old clock and the distant sound of Tommy's soft breathing from the next room. Outside, the streets of Cedar Harbor were dark and still, unaware of the small group gathered around a kitchen table, planning to challenge a powerful man's carefully constructed world of secrets and threats. Rosa's hands had steadied around her mug, drawing strength from the quiet determination around her. Pastor Ruth smiled her gentle, knowing smile, and Eleanor looked at Danny with the same warmth he remembered from their youth, tempered now by years of experience and the weight of the fight ahead. They had found their purpose, their reason to stand firm against the coming storm. It wasn't just about clearing Danny's name anymore. It was about protecting a mother and her child, about exposing long-buried truths, about proving that sometimes ordinary people could stand up to power and win. Danny looked around the table at these three women, the pastor with her quiet strength, the billionaire with her resources and resolve, and the young mother with her fierce love for her son. Whatever Clayton threw at them, they would face it together. The morning sun filtered through the tall windows of Eleanor's office, casting warm squares of light across the polished floor. Danny sat in one of the leather chairs facing her desk, his work-roughened hands resting on his knees. The peacoat, the one that had started it, all hung neatly on the coat rack by the door. Eleanor pulled a folder from her desk drawer and placed it between them. Her movements were precise, but there was a warmth in her eyes that hadn't been there during their first meeting. Danny, I need someone I can trust to oversee the facilities at the new mentorship center. He shifted in his chair, already forming a polite refusal. Eleanor, I appreciate the thought, but this isn't charity, she cut in, her voice firm but gentle. The position needs to be filled, and filled by someone who understands what we're trying to build here. She opened the folder, revealing a detailed contract. The salary is standard for the industry, with full benefits. You'd be managing maintenance, security, and coordinating with contractors. Danny leaned forward, scanning the first page. The salary figure made his eyes widen slightly, was more than his current 2 jobs combined. I don't have the fancy credentials some of your other employees probably do. Eleanor's laugh was soft and genuine. 20 years of military mechanical experience and problem-solving skills? That's worth more than a framed degree. She pulled out a sheet showing the center's blueprint. Besides, you've already proven you're someone who does the right thing, even when it's difficult. Danny studied the plans, his mechanic's mind automatically noting the heating systems, security points, and maintenance access. It's a big responsibility. Yes, it is. Eleanor's fingers traced the edge of her desk. And with everything happening with Rosa and Clayton, I need people I can count on. People who aren't afraid to stand up when things get tough. The mention of Rosa brought a determined set to Danny's jaw. He thought of her trembling hands at Pastor Ruth's table, of Tommy sleeping innocently on the couch. The press is already trying to paint me as someone looking for a handout. Taking this job now could make things harder, Eleanor acknowledged. But it could also give you a stronger position to help. Official access, authority, resources. She paused, then added softly, and you wouldn't have to work yourself to exhaustion between two jobs anymore. Danny thought of Maya, how she worried about him coming home late every night, how she tried to hide her concern behind jokes about his vampire schedule. He thought of the mentorship center, of what it could mean for kids like Hera, a safe place to create, to learn, to grow. The contract is for 1 year initially, Eleanor continued, sliding a pen across the desk, with option for renewal based on performance. Standard health insurance, retirement plan, paid vacation, things you've more than earned. Danny picked up the pen, its weight familiar yet somehow different from the ones he used to sign delivery logs or cleaning reports. You're sure about this? Even with everything that's happening? Eleanor's posture straightened, and for a moment he saw the steel beneath her gentle exterior. Especially with everything that's happening. We're building something important here, Danny. Something that could help a lot of people. I need someone who sees that bigger picture. He nodded slowly, understanding what she wasn't saying directly. This wasn't just about managing a building. It was about creating a safe space, protecting people who needed it, standing firm when pressure came, and pressure would come. The contract sat between them, crisp and official. Danny read through it carefully, asking questions about specific responsibilities, schedules, and expectations. Eleanor answered each one patiently, sometimes pulling out additional documents for clarification. Finally, Danny uncapped the pen. His signature would change things for him, for Maya, for the community they were trying to build. It was a weight, yes, but maybe also a shield, a way to fight back against the likes of Clayton Hargreaves with something more than just determination. He signed his name on the dotted line, the ink flowing smooth and dark. Eleanor countersigned immediately, her elegant script next to his more practical handwriting. She held out her hand, and they shook on it, the gesture carrying more meaning than just a business agreement. "Welcome aboard, Mr. Brooks," she said with a small smile, using his formal name for perhaps the first and last time. "Shall we go see your new workplace?" A network of whispers. The evening shadows lengthened across the church's fellowship hall as Pastor Ruth sat at her desk, her old rotary phone pressed to her ear. The worn leather address book lay open before her, its pages dog-eared and filled with neat handwriting. Maya curled up in a nearby armchair, her sketchbook balanced on her knees. "Yes, Sarah, that's right," Pastor Ruth spoke softly into the receiver. "A safe place, just for a few days until we sort things out." She made a note in her book, nodding. "God bless you, dear. I'll be in touch." Maya's pencil moved across the paper, capturing Tommy's joyful expression as she remembered him flying his red kite at the park last week. The sound of Pastor Ruth's quiet conversations had become a soothing backdrop to her drawing. Danny paced near the windows, his new peacoat draped over a chair. The weight of responsibility pressed on his shoulders, but he couldn't help feeling grateful for the small army of helpers Pastor Ruth was quietly assembling. "Brother James?" Pastor Ruth's voice brightened. "How's that empty apartment above your shop coming along?" She listened intently, making another note. "Perfect timing, isn't it? The Lord works in mysterious ways." Rosa sat nearby, Tommy sleeping in her lap. Her fingers gently stroked his dark hair, her eyes distant with worry. But each time Pastor Ruth confirmed another safe house or helper, some of the tension eased from her shoulders. "Your drawing's coming along beautifully, Maya," Danny said, pausing to look over his granddaughter's shoulder. Maya held up the sketch. "See how happy Tommy looks when he's flying his kite? I wanted to catch that feeling." "You certainly did, sweetheart." Danny squeezed her shoulder gently. Pastor Ruth set down the phone for a moment, taking a sip of her now cold tea. "That's 3 safe houses lined up, plus Sarah's cousin who works with immigration lawyers." She smiled at Rosa. "We're building quite a safety net, dear." "I don't know how to thank you all," Rosa whispered, careful not to wake Tommy. "No thanks needed," Pastor Ruth replied firmly. "This is what community means. The church's old radiator clicked and hummed, adding its voice to the quiet conversation. Outside, the streetlights began to flicker on, one by one, like earthbound stars. Maya turned to a fresh page in her sketchbook and began a new drawing. This time, it was a simple but powerful image. Hands joined in a circle, with the words, "Tell the truth, grown-ups," written in her neat artist script. Pastor Ruth picked up the phone again, dialing another number from memory. "Evening, Margaret." "Yes, it's Ruth. Remember that conversation we had about emergency housing?" Her voice remained steady and warm, like a beacon in the growing darkness. Danny checked his watch and was about to suggest they head home when his phone buzzed with a text message. The number was unfamiliar. "Mr. Brooks, I work front desk at Hargreaves Lake Point Hotel. Have important information. Meet tomorrow 7 a.m., Rico's Diner. Come alone. Delete this message." He read it twice, then carefully deleted it as requested. His heart beat a little faster, but he kept his expression neutral, not wanting to worry Maya or Rosa. Pastor Ruth was still working her way through her contact list, each call adding another thread to the protective web she was weaving. "Elizabeth, how are you, dear? I need to ask a favor." Maya yawned and closed her sketchbook, tucking it into her backpack. She walked over to Rosa and gently touched Tommy's hand. The little boy stirred but didn't wake. "We should get you home," Danny said softly to Maya. "School tomorrow." Pastor Ruth covered the phone's mouthpiece. "Go on, you two. I'll keep working on this. Rosa and Tommy will be safe here tonight. Brother James is bringing over an air mattress." Danny helped Maya into her coat while Rosa mouthed thank you to them both. The church's heavy wooden doors creaked softly as they stepped out into the cool evening air. Just before they left, Danny caught a final glimpse through the window. Pastor Ruth still at her desk, phone to her ear, her silver hair glowing in the lamplight as she continued building their network of hope, one call at a time. Rosa cradling Tommy, her posture finally beginning to relax. And Maya's sketchbook left open on the chair, the drawing of joined hands clearly visible, a simple but powerful reminder of why they were all fighting this battle. The mysterious text message seemed to burn in his memory as he and Maya walked home through the quiet streets of Cedar Harbor, but he kept his voice light as they discussed her homework for tomorrow. Whatever information the hotel worker had, it would have to wait until morning. For now, his focus was on getting his granddaughter safely home and ensuring she felt secure in the midst of all this uncertainty. Maya slipped her small hand into his as they walked. "Grandpa?" "Yes, sweetheart? We're doing the right thing, aren't we? Helping Rosa and Tommy?" Danny squeezed her hand. "Yes, we are. Sometimes doing the right thing isn't easy, but that doesn't make it any less right." They continued their walk home in comfortable silence, leaving behind the warm lights of the church, where Pastor Ruth's quiet revolution of kindness continued to grow, one phone call at a time. The neon sign of Jerry's Diner buzzed faintly in the gray morning light. Danny sat in the corner booth, his hands wrapped around a chipped coffee mug. The vinyl seat squeaked as he shifted, checking his watch for the third time. The breakfast rush had dwindled to a few regulars at the counter, their newspapers rustling as they read. A bell jingled as the door opened. A woman in her 50s, dressed in a crisp hotel uniform, scanned the diner before making her way to Danny's booth. Her name tag read, Margaret. "Mr. Brooks?" Her voice was barely above a whisper. When Danny nodded, she slid into the seat across from him. "Thank you for meeting me," Danny said, pushing a fresh cup of coffee toward her. "I understand the risk you're taking." Margaret's fingers drummed nervously on the table. "I've worked at the Grand Harbor Hotel for 23 years. What I've seen." She shook her head, reaching into her purse. "This isn't just about Rosa." She pulled out a small USB drive, keeping it hidden under her palm. "I kept records, dates, times, names when I had them. Security footage timestamps. Which rooms got special cleaning services ordered. Which guests received compensation packages." Her mouth twisted on the last words. Danny felt the weight of what she was offering. "How many?" "At least 7 women I know of. Maybe more." Margaret's hand trembled as she lifted her coffee cup. "Clayton Hargreaves has a pattern. The management knows. They help cover it up." A waitress approached with a pot of coffee. Both Danny and Margaret fell silent until she'd topped off their cups and moved away. "The Foundation's legal team will protect your identity," Danny assured her. "Eleanor Whitmore herself gave me her word." Margaret's eyes widened slightly at Eleanor's name. "Miss Whitmore, she believes Rosa?" "She does." Danny's voice was firm. And she's not backing down. Margaret slid the USB drive across the table. Danny pocketed it quickly, feeling the small device like a burning coal against his chest. "There's something else," Margaret said, leaning forward. "Last month, one of the maids, Maria, she quit suddenly. No notice. Just disappeared. The timing." She swallowed hard. It was right after Mr. Hargreaves stayed in the presidential suite. Danny's coffee turned bitter in his mouth. He pulled out a small notebook, jotting down the details. "Do you have Maria's last name?" Margaret nodded, writing it on a napkin along with the date. "I tried calling her number, but it's disconnected." She glanced at the diner's clock and straightened. "I need to get to work. My shift starts in 20 minutes. "Thank you," Danny said quietly. "This will help more than you know." Margaret stood, smoothing her uniform. "Mr. Brooks? Tell Miss Whitmore. Tell her some of us still believe in doing what's right." After she left, Danny sat for a while, watching steam rise from his coffee. His veteran's instincts, honed by years of reading situations and people, told him Margaret's information was solid. But it was also dynamite, the kind that could blow up in all their faces if they weren't careful. He drove straight to the Whitmore Foundation, the USB drive secure in his inner coat pocket. The lobby was quiet, most of the staff gone for lunch. Eleanor met him at the elevator, concern etched on her face. "How did it go?" she asked as they walked to her office. "Better than we hoped, worse than we feared." Danny handed her the drive. "Your legal team needs to see this right away." Eleanor's office was a warm space, despite its modern design, with photographs of community projects lining the walls. She called her head lawyer, James Chin, who arrived within minutes, tablet in hand. 2 more lawyers joined them, along with Eleanor's most trusted IT security expert. They gathered around the conference table as James plugged in the USB drive. The hotel logs appeared on the large screen. Dates, room numbers, special requests. Margaret's careful notes filled in the gaps, painting a picture that made Danny's stomach turn. The lawyers' expressions grew increasingly grave as they scrolled through the files. The timestamps matched the security footage references, the IT expert confirmed. "These haven't been altered." James Chin removed his glasses, rubbing the bridge of his nose. "This establishes a clear pattern of behavior, and the hotel management's involvement in the cover-ups." He shook his head. "This goes beyond just Mr. Hargreaves. Some of these women might be willing to come forward," one of the other lawyers suggested, "especially if they know they're not alone." Eleanor stood by the window, her reflection ghosted against the city skyline. "Find Maria," she said firmly, "and reach out to the others, carefully, respectfully. Let them know they have support if they choose to speak up." The legal team began sorting through the documents, making notes, building their case piece by careful piece. Danny watched their grave faces as they worked, knowing that Margaret's brave choice had just changed everything. "Thank you," Eleanor said softly, touching Danny's arm, "for being someone people trust with the truth." Danny thought of Maya's simple, powerful words in her sketch. "Tell the truth, grown-ups. Sometimes courage looked like a hotel concierge with a USB drive. Sometimes it looked like a billionaire willing to risk everything to protect the vulnerable. And sometimes it looked like his granddaughter, reminding them all what really mattered." The lawyers continued their review as the afternoon sun cast long shadows across Eleanor's office floor. Their faces remained grave as they uncovered more details, more patterns, more lives affected by power and silence. The Mentorship Center hummed with life on Saturday evening. Strings of warm lights crisscrossed the ceiling, casting a gentle glow over folding tables draped in checkered cloths. The aroma of competing chili recipes filled the air, mixing with the sound of laughter and choir practice drifting from the stage area. Maya stood in front of her artwork display, fidgeting with the edge of her blue dress. Her paintings and sketches lined the wall in neat rows, each one carefully framed by Danny the night before. The centerpiece was her largest work yet, a watercolor of Cedar Harbor's lighthouse at sunset, with small boats dotting the harbor like scattered dreams. "Your grandfather told me you were talented," Eleanor said, appearing beside Maya. She wore a simple sweater and slacks instead of her usual business attire. "But these are extraordinary." Maya's cheeks flushed pink. "Thank you, Miss Whitmore." "Eleanor," she corrected gently, "artists should be on a first-name basis, don't you think?" Danny approached carrying 3 bowls of chili, managing to balance them expertly. "The Jensen family recipe is definitely in the lead," he reported, handing them out, "though Mrs. Rodriguez's spicy version might give it a run for its money." The community center buzzed with activity around them. Pastor Ruth led the choir through their warm-ups, their voices blending in sweet harmony. Children darted between tables, their parents calling after them with fond exasperation. At one table, Rosa helped Tommy carefully color a picture, their heads bent together in concentration. "The turnout is amazing," Danny said, watching the room fill with more neighbors. Some he recognized from his shuttle route, others from the church. They all moved through the space with easy familiarity, stopping to admire artwork and sample different chili bowls. The choir began their first song, a hopeful melody about better days ahead. Eleanor's hand found Danny's arm, squeezing gently. "Dance with me?" Danny hesitated, but Maya gave him a playful push. "Go on, Grandpa. Show us your moves." Other couples were already making their way to the small dance floor. Danny offered Eleanor his hand, leading her to join them. The choir's voices soared, filling the room with warmth. "I haven't danced in years," Danny admitted quietly as they started to sway. Eleanor's eyes crinkled with amusement. "Like riding a bike, I suspect." She moved closer, her hand steady in his. "Do you remember the spring formal, senior year? You wore a yellow dress," Danny said without hesitation. "We danced to that Elvis song." "Can't help falling in love," Eleanor finished. Her voice grew soft with memory. "My father was so angry when I came home late." They turned slowly, finding their rhythm together. Around them, the community night continued in full swing. Maya had joined Tommy at his coloring table, showing him how to blend colors. Pastor Ruth walked between the chili stations with her judging clipboard, making appreciative noises. "Look at what you've built here," Danny said, nodding toward the bustling room. "All these people coming together, it matters." Eleanor's eyes grew bright. "We built it, all of us." She looked up at him. "I forgot what this felt like, being part of something real." The choir transitioned to another song, this one slower. Other dancers noticed Danny and Eleanor, smiling in their direction. Someone whispered, "About time." Gentle applause rippled through the crowd. Danny felt his ears grow warm, but he didn't pull away. Eleanor's hand was warm in his, her presence steady and sure. For just this moment, the weight of recent troubles seemed to lift. The music wrapped around them like a familiar blanket, and the community center glowed with possibility. Maya watched from her art wall, sketching quickly on a fresh page. Her grandfather's smile was the most genuine she'd seen in years. Around them, their community moved in its own gentle dance of connection, sharing food, stories, and simple kindness. The song drew to a close, but Danny and Eleanor stayed swaying for one more measure, their steps easy and unhurried. The crowd's soft applause felt like a blessing, a quiet celebration of something long overdue finding its way home. In that moment, surrounded by art and music and the warmth of neighbors, all the recent shadows seemed to retreat. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges. But tonight was for community, for healing, for remembering what they were all fighting to protect. The choir began another song, and more couples joined the dance floor. Danny and Eleanor continued their slow revolution, two people finding their way back to a rhythm they'd never quite forgotten. Monday morning brought a chill that cut straight through Danny's peacoat as he walked up to the Whitmore Foundation building. The USB drive felt heavy in his pocket, like it carried more than just digital files. Security waved him through. They knew him now, the facilities manager who'd returned the ring. The elevator climbed smoothly to the top floor. Danny's reflection in the polished doors showed a man trying his best to look composed, though his eyes carried the weight of too many sleepless nights. The doors opened to Eleanor's office suite, where her assistant Lisa gave him a quick, worried smile. "She's waiting for you," Lisa said, gesturing to the inner office. Eleanor stood at her floor-to-ceiling windows, one hand pressed against the glass as she stared out at the gray morning. She turned when Danny entered, and he saw the shadows under her eyes matched his own. "Morning," he said softly, pulling out the USB drive. "The concierge said there's years of logs here, times, dates, room numbers, names of other staff who were paid to keep quiet." Eleanor took the drive with careful fingers, as if it might burn her. "Thank you, Danny. I'll have our IT team verify everything before we move forward." She walked to a wall, safe behind her desk, punched in a code, and secured the drive inside. "The board's been calling all morning," she said, settling into her chair. "Major donors, too. They're concerned about the foundation's reputation." Danny lowered himself into one of the visitor chairs. "Concerned about the truth coming out, you mean?" "Exactly." Eleanor's mouth tightened. "The Riverside Development Group is threatening to pull their funding for the Youth Arts program." The Hamilton Trust says they're reconsidering their position. Even the mayor called, suggesting we focus on less controversial initiatives. They're all connected to Clayton somehow, aren't they? Eleanor nodded, pulling up a spreadsheet on her computer. Business partners, golf club members, political allies. He spent years building his network. The foundation helps hundreds of kids, Danny, these programs. She trailed off, rubbing her temples. You can't let them use good works as a shield for bad actions, Danny said quietly. That's not protecting the foundation. It's betraying everything it stands for. A small smile touched Eleanor's lips. You sound like my father, the preacher, not the businessman. She stood up and paced to the windows again. He always said doing the right thing would cost something. I just never thought I'd have to choose between helping people and helping the truth come out. Maybe you don't, Danny suggested. Maybe the truth helps more people in the long run. Eleanor's phone buzzed on her desk. Another donor call. She ignored it. Rosa's lawyer says she's ready to speak publicly. With the evidence on that drive to back her up, it would break Clayton's whole house of cards, Danny finished. And possibly the foundation's funding structure with it? Eleanor's voice was steady, but her hands clasped tightly together. I've started moving some personal assets around. If we lose donors, I can keep the core programs running for a while at least. Danny stood and walked over to her. Eleanor, you don't have to sacrifice everything you've built. We could find another way. She turned to face him, and for a moment, he saw the same determined girl from their youth group days, the one who'd stood up to bullies and organized food drives and dreamed of changing the world. Some things are worth sacrificing for, Danny. You taught me that, back when we were young, and you reminded me again when you brought back my mother's ring. The morning light caught the sapphire on her desk where it sat in its velvet pouch, throwing blue sparkles across the papers. Eleanor's phone buzzed again, more insistently this time. You should probably answer some of those, Danny said gently. Probably, but she made no move toward the desk. Danny, whatever happens next, thank you for bringing the ring back, for helping Rosa, for reminding me what courage looks like. Before he could respond, her phone lit up again. This time, Eleanor's face changed when she saw the screen. She picked it up, read the message, and her shoulders stiffened. It's from Clayton's assistant, she said, her voice tight. He knows we have something on him. The late afternoon sun streamed through the foundation's glass walls, turning the gathering crowd into silhouettes. The lobby buzzed with excitement as community members, foundation staff, and local press filled the chairs set up in neat rows. At the front, Maya's mural stood covered in a white cloth, stretching nearly 15 feet wide. Danny tugged at his tie, uncomfortable with all the attention. He sat in the front row between Maya and Eleanor, trying to focus on his daughter's bouncing enthusiasm rather than his nerves. Maya had refused to let anyone see the finished mural before the unveiling, even him. You look very distinguished, Mr. Community Steward, Eleanor whispered, smoothing a wrinkle from his sleeve. Her touch was gentle, steadying. Still feels strange, Danny muttered. I'm just doing what needs doing. That's exactly why you deserve this. Eleanor's eyes were warm. Sometimes the most important work comes from simply showing up day after day. The foundation's interim director stepped up to the podium, tapping the microphone. Good afternoon, everyone. We're gathered here to honor someone who exemplifies the very spirit of community service. Danny half listened to the speech, his mind drifting to Rosa and Tommy, safely tucked away at Pastor Ruth's house. They'd wanted to come but agreed it was safer to stay out of sight until tomorrow's interview. His hands clenched at the thought of what Rosa was preparing to do. The director's voice pulled him back. And now, please welcome our community steward honoree, Daniel Brooks. Maya squeezed his hand as he stood. The applause felt too loud, too much, but he made himself walk to the podium. Looking out at the faces, retired veterans he'd driven in his shuttle, kids from the mentorship program, church members who'd known him for years, he felt his nervousness ease slightly. Thank you, he began, his voice rough. I'm not much for speeches, but I believe in this community, in looking out for each other, especially those who need it most. He paused, gathering his thoughts. When I found that ring in an old coat pocket, I never imagined where it would lead. But it reminded me that small acts of honesty can ripple out in ways we don't expect. Sometimes doing the right thing is simple, sometimes it's harder, but it's always worth it. He saw Eleanor dabbing at her eyes in the front row, and Maya beaming with pride. My granddaughter Maya taught me that art can speak truth when words fail. So I'd like to ask her to unveil her mural now. Maya practically bounced to the front. She gripped the cloth, looking back at Danny for encouragement. He nodded, and she pulled. Gasps filled the room. The mural blazed with color, a sunrise breaking through storm clouds, illuminating a diverse crowd of people holding hands in a circle. In the center, a small figure held up a lantern, its light spreading outward in golden rays. Danny recognized Tommy's curls on the lantern bearer, though Maya had been careful not to make it too obvious. "I call it Hold the Light," Maya announced clearly into the microphone. "Because when things get dark, we have to help each other be brave." The applause was thunderous. Danny hugged Maya tight, his heart so full it hurt. Eleanor joined them, her hand finding Danny's shoulder. "It's beautiful, Maya," she said. "You've captured exactly what we're trying to build here." The ceremony moved into its reception phase, with punch and cookies served as people mingled and admired the mural up close. Danny found himself surrounded by well-wishers, accepting congratulations with awkward grace. Pastor Ruth appeared at his elbow, her eyes serious despite her smile. "Rose is ready," she murmured. "Channel 7 agreed to interview her at the church tomorrow morning. Their investigative reporter has been following Clayton's pattern for months. She just needed someone willing to go on record." Danny nodded, his throat tight. "She's sure?" "She says Maya's mural gave her courage. If a little boy can hold up the light, she told me, I can speak the truth." Eleanor joined them, having overheard. "Our legal team will be there. We've documented everything. She won't face this alone." Danny watched Maya showing Tommy's mother the details in the mural through the video call Pastor Ruth had secretly arranged. Rose's voice was thick with tears as she praised the painting, but her words were strong. "Mañana, mi amor. Tomorrow we tell the truth." The three adults shared a look of determination. Tomorrow would change everything, but tonight they celebrated hope. Captured in paint, built on trust, and sustained by the quiet courage of ordinary people choosing to stand together. Maya's mural glowed in the setting sun, its golden rays seeming to pulse with life. The lantern bearer's face wore a smile of pure joy, reminding them all what they were fighting for. A future where truth prevailed and no one had to hide in shadows. The knock came at 5:47 a.m., 3 sharp raps that yanked Danny from sleep. His heart jumped as he stumbled to the door, bare feet cold against the floor. Through the peephole, he saw 2 official-looking figures in the dim hallway light. "Mr. Brooks, Child Protective Services. We need to speak with you regarding a complaint about Maya's living situation." Danny's stomach dropped. He opened the door to find a tall woman with graying hair and a younger man holding a tablet, both wearing badges. "I'm Sandra Myers, and this is Tom Collins. May we come in?" Danny stepped aside, his mind racing. Maya's sleeping. What's this about? "We received an anonymous tip expressing concern about unsafe conditions." Sandra's eyes swept the small apartment. Multiple jobs, irregular hours, possible neglect. "That's ridiculous." Danny kept his voice low but firm. "I've raised Maya since her mother passed. She's never missed a meal or a doctor's appointment. Check her school record straight, has perfect attendance." Tom tapped his tablet. "Nevertheless, we're required to investigate all reports. We'll need to speak with Maya and inspect the premises." "At 6 in the morning?" Danny's hands clenched. "She has a math test today. Can't this wait?" "Mr. Brooks," Sandra's tone sharpened. "Refusing to cooperate could complicate matters." Before Danny could respond, Maya appeared in her doorway, already dressed in her school uniform. "Grandpa, what's going on?" "It's okay, sweetheart." Danny moved to her side. "These people just need to ask us some questions." For the next hour, the officers poked through their home, opening cabinets, checking Maya's room, photographing the perfectly stocked fridge, and the medication schedule Danny kept on the whiteboard. They questioned Maya separately, which made Danny's blood boil, but he forced himself to stay calm. Maya handled it with remarkable composure, showing them her art supplies, her homework station, the calendar where she and Danny planned their schedules. "Grandpa makes sure I eat breakfast every morning," she explained. "We have dinner together most nights, and when he works late, Mrs. Rodriguez next door checks on me. I'm 13, not a baby." Finally, Sandra closed her notebook. "We'll need to follow up, but everything appears to be in order. However, Mr. Brooks, I should warn you that these investigations often trigger additional oversight." After they left, Danny pulled Maya into a tight hug. "I'm so sorry, kiddo. It was Clayton, wasn't it?" Maya's voice was muffled against his shoulder. Because we're helping Rosa? Probably. Danny checked his watch. Let's get you to school. I'll call Eleanor on the way. The morning crawled by in a haze of worry. Danny went through the motions at work, checking his phone constantly. Around noon, Eleanor called. Danny, you need to see this. Someone leaked a video to the press. They're saying, it looks bad. He found a quiet corner in the shuttle depot break room to watch the clip she sent. His blood ran cold. The grainy security footage showed him in the foundation's parking garage, apparently accepting an envelope from a shadowy figure. The timestamp matched last week, when he'd been collecting maintenance reports. That's not what happened, he growled into the phone. They edited it somehow. Where's the part showing the maintenance supervisor handing me the weekly logs? I know, Eleanor's voice was tight. Our tech team is analyzing it, but the damage is spreading. Social media is already calling you a fraud who orchestrated everything for money. Danny's next words were cut off by another call, Pastor Ruth's number flashing urgently. I have to go, he told Eleanor. Something's wrong. He switched lines. Pastor Ruth's words tumbled out. Danny, they just raided Rosa's apartment. Immigration officers. Tommy got separated from her in the chaos. She managed to call me before running, but where's Tommy? Danny was already heading for his car. Safe. The church secretary found him hiding in the laundromat next door and brought him here. But Rosa's terrified, and these officers had no warrant, Danny. This isn't a routine check. Keep them there. I'm on my way. Danny's hand shook as he started the engine. And Ruth, call Eleanor's lawyer. Now. The morning CPS visit suddenly made horrible sense. This was coordinated, designed to split them apart, to silence Rosa before she could speak out. Danny's jaw clenched as he drove, watching his rearview mirror for tails. They'd known Clayton would fight back, but this level of retaliation? His phone buzzed with a text from Eleanor. News vans outside the foundation. Board called emergency meeting. Don't talk to anyone until our lawyers clear it. Danny thought of Maya, still at school, probably seeing the awful headlines on her classmates' phones. Of Rosa, running scared through the city. Of Tommy, separated from his mother for the first time in his life. The truth was supposed to protect them. Instead, it had painted targets on all their backs. When Danny pulled into the church parking lot, he saw Pastor Ruth waiting by the side door. Her face was grave as she ushered him inside. In her office, Tommy sat curled in an oversized armchair, clutching his stuffed dinosaur, eyes red from crying. Uncle Danny! The boy launched himself into Danny's arms. Danny held him close, meeting Pastor Ruth's worried gaze over Tommy's head. In just a few hours, their careful plans had shattered. The people they'd tried to protect were scattered and scared. And somewhere in the city, Rosa was alone, running from officers who had no right to chase her. The morning's words from the CPS officer echoed in his mind. These investigations often trigger additional oversight. They'd known exactly what they were doing, using the system itself as a weapon. Pastor Ruth's phone rang Eleanor's lawyer. As she answered it, Danny sank into a chair, still holding Tommy. The boy's small fingers gripped Danny's shirt like it was a lifeline. It's okay, buddy, Danny whispered, though nothing felt okay. We're going to figure this out. But the doctored video was already viral. The raids were in motion, and Danny could feel the walls closing in. Everything they'd built was balanced on the edge of a cliff, and their opponents had just given it a mighty shove. When principles stand taller than towers. The Whitmore Foundation's boardroom felt colder than usual that evening. 12 faces lined the mahogany table, their expressions ranging from concern to openly hostile. Eleanor sat at the head, her spine straight, hands folded calmly on the polished surface. The setting sun painted orange stripes across the floor through the vertical blinds. The evidence is quite damaging, Eleanor, said Richard Blackwood, the board's senior member. His silver hair caught the fading light as he adjusted his glasses. We must take immediate action to protect the Foundation's reputation. Eleanor's voice remained steady. The video is clearly doctored. Our tech team is working to prove it. That could take days. Margaret Chin interjected, tapping her pen against a stack of papers. The press is having a field day. Donors are threatening to pull funding. We need to demonstrate decisive leadership. By throwing an innocent man to the wolves? Eleanor's eyes narrowed. Danny Brooks is a veteran who's dedicated his life to serving others. He discovered my mother's ring and returned it without hesitation. He's helping protect a young mother and child from exploitation. These attacks against him are orchestrated. Nevertheless, Richard leaned forward. The optics are terrible. A custodian with access to sensitive areas, mysterious evidence of corruption, and now this CPS investigation. The simplest solution is to suspend him pending review. No. The word fell like a stone in water. Eleanor, be reasonable. I said no. She opened a folder, spreading photographs across the table. These are documented instances of Clayton Hargreaves' pattern of behavior. Hotel logs, witness statements, NDAs forced on vulnerable women. Danny helped uncover this evidence. That's why he's being targeted. Margaret's face tightened. Clayton Hargreaves' Family Foundation provides 20% of our annual operating budget. So we're willing to enable abuse to keep the lights on? Eleanor's voice rose slightly. Is that what my mother's legacy has become? Your mother, Richard said carefully, understood the delicate balance required in philanthropy, sometimes difficult compromises. My mother taught me that true charity requires courage. Eleanor stood, placing both palms on the table. She wore that ring as a reminder to stand firm when things got hard. I will not suspend Danny Brooks for doing the right thing. The board members exchanged glances. Richard cleared his throat. Then you leave us no choice. As per Article 7 of the Foundation's bylaws, the board can temporarily suspend executive authority if the president's actions pose a significant risk to the organization's stability. Eleanor's heart stuttered, but her face remained composed. You're suspending me? Until this crisis is resolved. Margaret wouldn't meet her eyes. It's for the best, Eleanor. Take some time. Let us handle damage control. And what about Rosa? What about Tommy? Eleanor looked around the table. What about all the other women Clayton has silenced? Those are serious allegations that should be handled through proper channels, Richard said smoothly, not through public scandal that threatens everything we've built. Eleanor slowly gathered her papers. Everything we've built means nothing if we won't use it to protect the vulnerable. That's what this foundation was created for. Security will escort you out. Richard continued as if she hadn't spoken. Your office should be cleared by morning. All foundation communications will go through the board until further notice. Eleanor straightened to her full height, channeling every ounce of her mother's dignity. I won't forget who stood silent tonight. Neither will history. She turned toward the door, then paused. And Richard, that ring my mother wore? The inscription was from Psalm 27. The Lord is my light and my salvation, whom shall I fear? The walk to her office felt longer than usual. Security guards flanked her, their presence a strange mix of awkward and insulting. She'd known most of them for years. Inside, she closed the door softly and looked around the familiar space. Family photos lined the shelves. Her parents at the foundation's opening, her mother teaching Sunday school, her father's proud smile at her college graduation. She carefully wrapped each frame in tissue paper, placing them in a cardboard box. Her fingers brushed a small album hidden behind the awards. Inside, yellowed with age, was the photo from that long-ago summer. Teenage Danny laughing under the maple tree, his whole life ahead of him. Eleanor had walked away then, bowing to pressure and expectations. She traced the image gently. Not this time, she whispered. The desk drawers yielded more memories. Thank you notes from grant recipients, children's drawings, the original mission statement in her mother's handwriting. Eleanor packed each item deliberately, her mind already racing ahead to next steps. The thumb drive with Clayton's evidence was safely hidden. Rosa and Tommy had sanctuary at the church. Danny would blame himself, try to step away to protect the foundation's work. She couldn't let him carry that burden alone, not again. The last rays of sunset faded as Eleanor filled the final box. She stood in the center of the officer's second home for so many years and closed her eyes. Lord, she whispered, her mother's favorite prayer rising naturally to her lips. Grant me the courage to stand when it's hardest. Show me the way to protect those who need shelter. And please, help me be worthy of the light you've given me to carry. The words settled into the quiet room like a promise. When the wind howls, sing. Sleet pelted Danny's windshield as he navigated the familiar streets to Maya's middle school. His old pickup truck's wipers squeaked against the glass, fighting the frozen rain. His hands gripped the steering wheel tight, knuckles white. The morning's events kept replaying in his mind. The CPS visit, the doctored video, Rosa's panicked call about immigration officers. The school's brick building came into view through the gray curtain of sleet. Danny pulled up to the curb, his heart settling a bit when he spotted Maya waiting under the covered entrance with her art teacher, Mrs. Chen. His girl looked small, huddled in her purple winter coat, backpack clutched to her chest. Maya hurried through the wet to the truck, yanking the creaky door open. "Grandpa, is it true what they're saying? Are they going to take me away?" "No, sweetheart." Danny helped her climb in, his voice gentle but firm. "Those CPS people? They're just checking because someone made a false report. We've got nothing to hide." Mrs. Chen approached the driver's side window, which Danny rolled down despite the weather. "Mr. Brooks," she said quietly. "Maya was upset at lunch when she saw the news on another student's phone. I want you to know the art department stands behind you both." "Thank you," Danny managed, his throat tight. "That means a lot." As they pulled away, Maya wiped fog from her window with her sleeve. "Where are we going? Not home?" "Pastor Ruth's place," Danny explained, taking the long way to avoid main streets. "Rosa and Tommy need a safe spot right now. We're going to help them." Maya nodded, her face serious beyond her 13 years. "Good, Tommy must be scared." The old parsonage came into view, its weathered white siding barely visible through the storm. Pastor Ruth's ancient station wagon sat in the gravel drive, covered in a thin sheet of ice. Danny parked behind it, helping Maya gather her things. They hurried up the walk, careful on the slippery steps. Before they could knock, the door opened to Pastor Ruth's concerned face. "Come in quickly," she urged, ushering them inside. The warmth and smell of coffee enveloped them. Rosa sat at the kitchen table, Tommy curled in her lap like a much younger child. Her face was pale, eyes red-rimmed. "Danny," she breathed. "Thank God you're safe. When I heard about the video." "It's fake," Danny assured her, helping Maya out of her wet coat. "Eleanor's tech people are working on proving it." "But the immigration officers?" Rosa's voice shook. "They came with no warning. If Mrs. Alvarez hadn't seen them first and texted me..." She hugged Tommy closer. Pastor Ruth poured coffee into thick ceramic mugs, adding hot chocolate for Maya and Tommy. "Rosa's documentation is in order," she explained. This was pure intimidation. "Our lawyer friend is already looking into it." Tommy lifted his head from his mother's shoulder, managing a small smile when he saw Maya. She sat beside them, pulling out her sketchbook. "Want to draw with me, Tommy? I brought extra pencils." Danny watched the children bend their heads together over the paper, Maya showing Tommy how to draw a superhero. His chest ached with pride at her instinct to comfort the scared little boy. Pastor Ruth touched his arm. "Eleanor called while you were getting Maya. She's been suspended by the board." "What?" Danny's coffee cup clattered against the saucer. "They can't do that. She founded the organization. They're trying to force her to cut ties with you and Rosa." Pastor Ruth sighed. She refused. Danny sank into a kitchen chair, the weight of guilt pressing down. "This is my fault. If I hadn't found that ring..." "Stop right there." Pastor Ruth's voice turned stern. "Evil doesn't win because good people take action. It wins when they stay silent." A knock at the door made them all freeze. Tommy whimpered, clutching his mother. Pastor Ruth peered through the curtain, then relaxed. "It's Eleanor." She opened the door to reveal Eleanor Whitmore, looking very different from her usual polished self. She wore jeans, flat shoes, and a warm sweater, her hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. In her arms, she balanced a covered casserole dish and her laptop bag. "I brought dinner," she announced, setting the dish on the counter. "My mother's lasagna recipe, and something else." She pulled a thumb drive from her bag, holding it up like a tiny beacon of hope. "What's that?" Danny asked, moving to help her with her wet coat. "The original hotel security footage." Eleanor's eyes sparked with determination. "Our chief technology officer authenticated it himself before the board suspended me. It shows Clayton paying off staff and, more importantly, proves you were nowhere near the location where that fake bribery video was supposed to have taken place." Rosa stood, settling Tommy in Maya's care. "You have proof? Real proof? Times, dates, locations?" Eleanor nodded. "Everything. Clayton's whole pattern of behavior, documented by the hotel's own security system. And there's more. The CTO found metadata proving the video they're using against Danny was digitally altered." "Thank God," Danny breathed, the tension in his shoulders easing slightly for the first time since morning. Pastor Ruth was already pulling plates from the cupboard. "First, we eat," she declared. "Can't fight corruption on empty stomachs. Then we'll look at that footage and make a plan." Eleanor began serving generous portions of lasagna while Pastor Ruth warmed bread in the oven. The smell of herbs and tomatoes filled the kitchen, somehow making everything feel a little more manageable. Maya and Tommy cleared their art supplies to make room for plates, the little boy's eyes lighting up at the sight of food. Danny watched them all, his granddaughter, his old love, his new friends gathered around Pastor Ruth's scratch kitchen table while sleet tapped against the windows. They were an unlikely group, a suspended billionaire, a widowed veteran, an immigrant mother, a pastor, and 2 children. But something about their unity, in the face of injustice, felt right, felt strong. "Danny?" Eleanor touched his arm gently. "Will you say grace?" He nodded, reaching for Maya's hand on one side and Eleanor's on the other. As the circle of joined hands closed around the table, he cleared his throat. "Lord, thank you for bringing us together. Thank you for this food, for shelter from the storm, and for friends who stand with us in trouble. Give us wisdom and courage for whatever comes next." "Amen. Amen," they echoed softly, and for a moment the howling wind outside seemed very far away. The parsonage dining room glowed warm against the stormy evening outside. Pastor Ruth's old oak table, scarred from decades of community suppers and Bible studies, now held their unlikely war council. Danny sat between Maya and Eleanor, while Rosa kept Tommy occupied with crayons in the corner. Pastor Ruth paced behind them, her reading glasses perched on her nose as she watched the laptop screen. The security footage played in grainy black and white. There was Clayton Hargreaves, clear as day, passing envelopes to hotel staff. The timestamp matched perfectly with when Danny was supposed to have taken the alleged bribe, except Danny appeared nowhere in the video. "The CTO authenticated it herself," Eleanor said, her voice steady despite her disheveled appearance. She'd traded her usual elegant attire for jeans and a simple sweater, her hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. She was furious when she realized someone had doctored the other video to frame Danny. Pastor Ruth leaned forward, squinting at the screen. "But will people believe this over the fake version that's already out there?" "They have to," Rosa spoke up from the corner, her voice trembling but determined. "Mr. Brooks helped me when no one else would. Now they're trying to hurt him and Maya because of me." Tommy looked up from his coloring at his mother's distress. "This isn't your fault, Rosa," Danny said firmly. "Clayton and his people, they're the ones choosing to do wrong." Maya, who had been unusually quiet, suddenly straightened in her chair. "What about my sketch? The one of Tommy flying his kite?" She pulled out her notebook, flipping to a page where she'd captured Tommy's joy during happier days at the community center. People should see the real Tommy and Rosa, not just hear about them in scary news stories. Eleanor's eyes lit up. "Maya's right. We need to show the human side of this. The community center, the mentorship programs, the real people being hurt by Clayton's actions." "But the foundation board," Pastor Ruth started. "I'm not afraid of them anymore." Eleanor interrupted, a flash of steel in her voice. "They suspended me? Fine. I'll start my own fund. One that actually stands for something besides protecting powerful men." Danny watched Tommy coloring, his small face scrunched in concentration. The boy reminded him so much of Maya at that age, innocent, trusting that the grown-ups would make things right. He thought about his own father, who'd taught him that doing the right thing wasn't always the easy thing. "The press will be brutal," Pastor Ruth warned, though her tone suggested she was playing devil's advocate rather than truly opposing them. "They'll dig into everyone's past, try to discredit you all." "Let them dig," Danny said quietly. "I've got nothing to hide. Worked hard all my life, raised my granddaughter best I could, been careful with every penny, never took what wasn't mine." Eleanor reached over and squeezed his hand. The gesture was quick but meaningful, carrying echoes of their shared past and, perhaps, hints of a future. "But your jobs?" Rosa protested. "The immigration people, they could come back? We've got the pro bono lawyer on standby," Pastor Ruth reminded her. "And the church community will stand with you. Remember how many people showed up for the chili cook-off? They're still those same good people." Maya looked up from her sketch, her young face serious. "Grandpa always says doing the right thing matters more than being scared." Thunder rumbled outside, and Tommy scampered over to Rosa, seeking comfort. She gathered him close, pressing a kiss to his dark curls. "I want my son to grow up knowing his mama stood up for the truth," she said softly. Eleanor pulled up another file on the laptop, other women's statements, carefully collected by her legal team. There are 12 others besides Rosa, all with similar stories about Clayton, all silenced by money and threats. 3 are willing to speak publicly if they're not alone. Pastor Ruth finally sat down, her expression thoughtful. You know, there's a reason that ring found its way to Danny. The Lord works in mysterious ways, but He always works toward justice. The rain drummed against the windows as they sat in contemplative silence. Danny looked around. Morning sunlight filtered through New Hope Church's stained glass windows, casting rainbow patterns across the worn wooden pews. The historic sanctuary, usually peaceful and quiet on weekday mornings, now hummed with tension and whispered conversations. News vans lined the street outside, their satellite dishes reaching toward the clear winter sky. Eleanor stood in the small office behind the sanctuary, smoothing her simple navy dress. She'd chosen to forego her usual designer labels, wearing instead a modest outfit that spoke of substance over style. Danny watched her hands tremble slightly as she arranged her note cards. "You don't have to do this," he said softly. "Your whole foundation is worth nothing if we can't use it to protect people who need help." Eleanor's chin lifted with quiet determination. "Besides, I learned a long time ago that doing the right thing costs something. That's what makes it valuable." Pastor Ruth knocked gently on the door. "They're ready. Rosa's in place with Tommy in the children's room. Security's keeping a close eye." Eleanor nodded, squaring her shoulders. Danny reached out and squeezed her hand briefly. The simple gesture carried echoes of their shared past and the strength they'd found in each other now. The sanctuary fell silent as Eleanor walked to the podium. Camera shutters clicked rapidly. Light glinted off the bank of microphones arranged before her. She took a deep breath, her gaze sweeping across the gathered crowd. Concerned citizens, curious onlookers, and predatory reporters, all mixed together in the wooden pews. "Good morning," Eleanor began, her voice clear and steady. "I'm Eleanor Whitmore, founder of the Whitmore Foundation. Many of you know me as a businesswoman and philanthropist. Today, I'm here as someone who made a choice between what was easy and what was right." She paused, letting her words settle in the hushed space. "Last week, our board of directors suspended me for refusing to distance myself from Danny Brooks, a man falsely accused of wrongdoing. They wanted me to stay quiet about serious allegations against Clayton Hargreaves, a major donor whose money has helped fund many of our programs." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Eleanor continued, her voice growing stronger. "I chose to stand with Mr. Brooks, with Rosa Martinez, and with every person who has been silenced by money and power. The Whitmore Foundation was created to help people, not to protect those who harm them." She gestured to a large screen that had been set up beside the pulpit. "We have authenticated security footage showing the real events of that night, proving Mr. Brooks' innocence. More importantly, we have documentation of a pattern of exploitation that can no longer be ignored." The footage began to play. The congregation watched in stunned silence as the truth unfolded in black and white. When it ended, Eleanor spoke again. "As of this morning, I'm establishing a new independent fund that will continue our mission without compromise. To those who tried to use their wealth to cover up wrongdoing, your money is no good here anymore." She stepped back from the podium, making way for Rosa, who emerged from the side door. Tommy's babysitter held him safely in the children's room, away from the cameras. Rosa's simple blouse and skirt spoke of dignity rather than victimhood. Her hands gripped the podium edges as she faced the crowd. "My name is Rosa Martinez," she began, her accent careful but clear. 3 years ago, I worked as a housekeeper at the Hargreaves Hotel. I was new to this country, trying to make a better life." She swallowed hard but pressed on. "Mr. Hargreaves, he said he would help me get my papers. He said many things. When I found out I was pregnant, he made me sign papers. He paid me to go away and stay quiet." The silence in the church grew heavier. Several women in the audience began nodding slowly, recognition and pain in their eyes. "I was ashamed for a long time," Rosa continued. "But my son Tommy had deserves the truth. All of us deserve the truth. Mr. Brooks and Miss Whitmore, they showed me that being afraid doesn't mean you have to stay silent." Tears glistened on the cheeks of several women in the pews. One older woman, in a flowered dress, wiped her eyes with a handkerchief, whispering, "Amen," as Rosa spoke. A younger woman in business attire sat rigid, her hands clenched in her lap, as if Rosa's words were unlocking something long buried. "I am not ashamed anymore." Rosa's voice gained strength, though it shook with emotion. "I am here because the truth matters more than fear, because other women need to know they are not alone. The truth prevails." The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the marble floors of the Cedar Harbor Courthouse. Danny sat on a wooden bench in the hallway, his weathered hands clasped together, watching officials and reporters hurry past. The peacoat that had started it all hung neatly beside him. Maya leaned against his shoulder, sketching in her ever-present notebook. "Mr. Brooks?" A young aide appeared, clipboard in hand. "The district attorney would like to see you now." Inside the wood-paneled conference room, District Attorney Sarah Chin stood at a polished table, surrounded by stacks of documents and several grim-faced attorneys. Eleanor sat near the window, her face composed but her eyes bright with contained emotion. "Mr. Brooks," D.A. Chin began, her voice clear and professional, "I want to thank you for your patience today. After reviewing the evidence presented this morning, including the authenticated security footage and hotel records, we are moving forward with multiple charges against Clayton Hargreaves." Danny's throat tightened. He thought of Rosa and Tommy, safely tucked away at Pastor Ruth's parsonage. What kind of charges? Obstruction of justice, witness intimidation, and coercion for starters. Chen shuffled through her papers. "The pattern of behavior established through the hotel logs is disturbing. We have testimony from 3 former employees corroborating the evidence on that USB drive." A knock at the door interrupted them. A tall man in a dark suit entered, carrying a tablet. "Ma'am, they've just taken Hargreaves into custody at his office. No incident." Eleanor's shoulders relaxed slightly, though her expression remained serious. The aide continued, "And the CPS supervisor is here with their findings." A woman in a gray blazer entered, introducing herself as Susan Torres from Child Protective Services. She carried a thick folder, stamped "Resolved" in red ink. "Mr. Brooks," Torres said warmly, "I want to personally apologize for the distress our investigation caused you and Maya. We've determined the complaint was maliciously filed with false information. Your case has been completely cleared, and we've flagged the incident to prevent any similar harassment in the future." Danny nodded, his chest loosening for the first time in days. Maya squeezed his hand. "There's more," D.A. Chin added, checking her phone. "Judge Martinez just signed an emergency injunction halting any immigration enforcement actions against Rosa Mendez or her son. The harassment stops now." Eleanor stood, smoothing her skirt. "And the foundation board?" "Resigned," her attorney confirmed from the doorway, where he'd appeared with another stack of papers. All 7 members submitted their resignations within the hour. "The interim board you selected has been approved. You're reinstated as executive director, effective immediately." Danny watched Eleanor's face, seeing the complex mix of relief and determination there. She'd risked everything, her reputation, her position, the foundation itself, to stand for what was right. The next hour passed in a blur of signatures and statements. Outside, reporters gathered on the courthouse steps, their cameras ready. Danny's stomach churned at the thought of facing them, but Eleanor touched his arm gently. "Together?" she asked softly. He nodded, thinking of that old ring that had brought them back into each other's lives. Together. They emerged into the late afternoon light. Camera flashes exploded around them like stars. Eleanor's hand found Danny's, warm and steady. Questions flew from all directions, but Danny barely heard them. In that moment, all he felt was the rightness of standing firm, of truth finally breaking through the shadows. The headlines would tell the story: developer arrested, Whitmore Foundation cleared, justice prevails. But for Danny, the real victory was in the smaller moments. Maya's proud smile, Rosa's tears of relief when she heard the news, Tommy's innocent laughter as he played in Pastor Ruth's garden, safe at last. Eleanor's fingers tightened around his as more cameras flashed. They stood straight and tall in the fading light, no longer afraid of what tomorrow might bring. The morning sun streamed through New Hope Church's stained glass windows, casting rainbow patterns across the gymnasium floor where volunteers bustled about. The space that had once served as a simple recreational area was transforming into something remarkable. Danny watched from the doorway as people from all corners of Cedar Harbor worked together, their shared purpose filling the air with hope. Maya stood on a stepladder, her paint-stained overalls matching her determined expression as she carefully traced letters onto a wide canvas banner. Hold the Light emerged in bold, flowing script, each stroke deliberate and bright. Below the words, she'd painted a delicate pattern of intertwined hands holding candles, their flames merging into a warm glow that seemed to radiate from the fabric itself. "She's got a real gift," Eleanor said softly, appearing at Danny's side. She wore jeans and a simple sweater, her hair pulled back in a casual ponytail, a far cry from her usual corporate attire. Somehow, she looked more herself this way. That she does, Danny agreed, watching his granddaughter add touches of gold to the flames. Though I think she gets the stubbornness from me. Eleanor laughed, the sound echoing in the busy space. I remember that stubborn streak. It's serving you well these days. Across the gym, Pastor Ruth directed a group setting up computer stations along one wall. The equipment had been donated by local businesses, eager to support the center's transition. Tables lined another wall, where Rosa and several other volunteers sorted through boxes of art supplies and books. Tommy zoomed past them, wearing a cape made from a bedsheet and carrying a toy plane. Look, Daddy, Danny, I'm flying. The nickname had stuck ever since he'd heard Maya use it, and Danny's heart warmed every time he heard it. Careful there, pilot, Danny called as Tommy weaved between ladder-wielding volunteers. Watch out for air traffic. Eleanor's eyes softened as she watched the boy. He seems happier every day. Having a safe place will do that, Danny said. Rosa, too. She's sleeping better now that the immigration threats are gone. The church apartment suits them. They walked further into the gym, greeting volunteers and checking on progress. The Mentorship Center's temporary home under New Hope's umbrella was coming together better than anyone had expected. Community support had poured in once the truth about Clayton came out, with local businesses and residents eager to help. The new independent fund is nearly ready, Eleanor said as they paused near a half-assembled bookshelf. Once everything's properly set up, we can transition the center back to foundation oversight. But I have to admit, there's something special about this arrangement. Danny nodded, understanding what she meant. The church's simple gymnasium had been transformed not just by new equipment and fresh paint, but by the spirit of the people working within it. Every corner held evidence of care and commitment. Hand-sewn cushions for the reading nook, carefully restored furniture, walls decorated with children's artwork. Maya climbed down from her ladder, brushing paint from her hands. What do you think? She asked, gesturing to the completed banner. Eleanor stepped closer, studying the intricate details. It's beautiful, Maya. The way the light seems to flow between the hands. It's perfect. It's about connection, Maya explained, her voice carrying the quiet wisdom that sometimes surprised even Danny. How we're stronger when we help each other hold on to hope. Pastor Ruth joined them, her practical shoes squeaking on the gym floor. Speaking of hope, she said, I believe we have one more item to address today. She glanced meaningfully at Eleanor. Eleanor nodded, reaching into her bag. She withdrew a familiar velvet pouch, the one that had started everything when Danny found it sewn into that thrifted peacoat. The sapphire ring caught the morning light as she held it up. I've been thinking about this ring, Eleanor said, her voice carrying across the now quieting gym, about what it means and where it belongs. Danny watched as she moved to a small display case that had been mounted near the entrance. It was simple but elegant, with warm wood and clear glass that caught the light from the windows. This ring belonged to my mother, Eleanor continued, addressing the gathered volunteers. She wore it as a reminder that courage isn't about being fearless, it's about doing what's right, even when you're afraid. When Danny found it and returned it to me, it started a chain of events that proved her point better than she could have imagined. She opened the display case carefully. Inside, a small placard read "The Courage Ring" in elegant script. Below it was a brief description of the ring's journey and its meaning to the community. This ring belongs here at New Hope, Eleanor said, placing it gently on its velvet cushion. Not just as a piece of jewelry, but as a symbol of what can happen when people choose courage over comfort, truth over convenience, and community over self-interest. The sapphire gleamed in its new home, the inscription, E+D, Psalm 27, visible through the glass. Danny remembered how it had felt in his pocket that first day, heavy with possibility. He could never have guessed where that possibility would lead. Maya's banner hung above the display case, its message clear and strong, "Hold the light." The morning sun streamed through the windows, catching the ring's blue stone and sending scattered light across the walls like stars. Pastor Ruth stepped forward, her hand resting on the display case. Let this ring remind us that courage often comes in small moments, in returning something found, in speaking truth, in standing beside those who need us. These small acts of courage create ripples that change lives. The gathered volunteers nodded, many of them having witnessed those changes firsthand over the past weeks. Rosa hugged Tommy close, their future now secure. Maya added one final touch to her banner, a small golden heart tucked into the corner. Eleanor closed the display case carefully, her fingers lingering for a moment on the glass. The ring that had once represented lost love and missed chances now stood for something larger: the power of community, the strength of truth, and the courage to stand firm when it mattered most. The late afternoon sun painted Cedar Harbor's lake in shades of amber and rose. Danny and Eleanor walked along the shoreline path, their footsteps synchronized after months of walking this same route together. The autumn air carried the crisp scent of fallen leaves and wood smoke from nearby homes. Eleanor had traded her usual business attire for comfortable jeans and a soft blue sweater that reminded Danny of the lake itself. Her silver hair caught the light, making it shimmer like the gentle waves lapping at the shore. "Remember when we used to come here as kids?" Danny asked, his hands tucked into the pockets of his navy peacoat, the same one that had started their whole journey months ago. Eleanor smiled, pausing to watch a flock of geese glide across the water. "The summer swim meets. You were terrible at the butterfly stroke, but unbeatable at the backstroke," Danny countered with a grin. "Mostly because I could see you watching from the bleachers that way." She laughed, the sound carrying across the water. "I thought I was being so subtle back then." "About as subtle as I was." Danny's right hand fidgeted with something in his pocket, his heart beating a little faster. "You know, I've been thinking a lot about those days lately." They reached their favorite bench, weathered wood worn smooth by years of visitors. Eleanor sat down, patting the space beside her. "Oh, what about them?" Danny remained standing, suddenly feeling like that nervous teenage boy again. "About how simple things were, how we didn't need much to be happy." He turned to face her, the setting sun warming his back. "And how sometimes the best things in life are the everyday moments." Eleanor's expression softened, her eyes meeting his with understanding. "Like our morning coffee talks? Like Maya's art supplies scattered across my kitchen table?" Danny nodded. "And Tommy's toy cars under the couch at your place." "The Sunday dinners at Pastor Ruth's," Eleanor added, her voice gentle. "Exactly." Danny took a deep breath and pulled his hand from his pocket. In his palm sat a simple silver band, nothing fancy or elaborate. Just a plain circle that caught the light like the lake water behind them. "I got to thinking maybe we could have more everyday moments. Together." Eleanor's breath caught as she looked at the ring. Danny continued, his voice steady despite his racing heart. "It's not sapphire or platinum. It's just sterling silver, for every day we've still got. For morning coffee and evening walks. For helping Maya with her art projects and reading bedtime stories to Tommy." He held out the ring, this simple circle that meant everything. "For doing the ordinary things with someone who's always been extraordinary to me." Tears welled in Eleanor's eyes as she reached out, her fingers brushing against his palm. "Danny Brooks," she whispered, "you've never been ordinary a day in your life." She picked up the ring, studying how it caught the light. Then, without fanfare or flourish, she slipped it onto her finger and whispered, "Yes." The spring breeze carried the scent of fresh grass and blooming wildflowers across Cedar Harbor's lakefront park. Maya sat cross-legged on a red-checkered blanket, her sketchbook propped against her knees as she captured Tommy's joyful dance with his kite. The blue diamond-shaped kite soared against the cloudless sky, its long tail ribboning in graceful swirls. "Higher, Tommy, you've almost got it to the clouds," Danny called from where he stood a few feet away, demonstrating the proper way to handle the kite string. His navy peacoat was draped over a nearby bench, the spring warmth making it unnecessary. Tommy's face scrunched in concentration as he gripped the plastic spool. "Like this, Mr. Danny?" His small hands adjusted their hold, mimicking Danny's technique perfectly. "That's it, buddy. You're a natural," Danny beamed, stepping back to let the 6-year-old take full control. Eleanor emerged from her car carrying a wicker picnic basket, her casual weekend outfit, jeans and a light sweater, a far cry from her usual business attire. She set the basket down on a corner of the blanket and settled beside Maya, peeking at the teenager's drawing. "That's beautiful, Maya," Eleanor said softly, admiring how the young artist had captured the joy on Tommy's face. "You've really caught his spirit." Maya ducked her head, pleased but shy about the praise. "Thanks. I wanted to show how happy he is now that everything's okay." She added a few more strokes to Tommy's wind-blown hair. "No more being scared." Rosa approached from the parking lot, carrying a tote bag filled with drinks and paper plates. Her steps were lighter these days, her smile coming more easily. The constant worry that had lined her face for so long had softened into something more peaceful. "Mama, look!" Tommy shouted, pointing skyward with his free hand. "I'm flying it all by myself." "I see you, mi amor." Rosa called back, pride evident in her voice. She set down her bag and took a seat on the blanket, accepting the sandwich Eleanor offered. He's been talking about learning to fly a kite for weeks. Danny's a good teacher, Eleanor said, distributing plates to everyone, though I seem to remember him getting his own kite stuck in that oak tree over there about 30 years ago. Danny laughed, walking over to join them. I was trying to impress a certain someone with my non-existent kite-flying skills. He winked at Eleanor, who rolled her eyes fondly. And how did that work out for you? Maya asked, setting aside her sketchbook to help unpack the food. Well, considering that same someone is sitting here today, Danny grinned, accepting a sandwich from Eleanor. Tommy came running over, the kite temporarily forgotten in favor of lunch. I'm hungry. Can I have the turkey one, please? Of course, Carino, Rosa said, already unwrapping one for him. Wash your hands first. I brought the sanitizer. As they ate, the conversation flowed easily between them, punctuated by Tommy's enthusiastic commentary about his kite-flying adventures and Maya's quiet observations about the way the sunlight played on the lake's surface. Oh, Rosa exclaimed suddenly, her eyes lighting up. I almost forgot to tell you. I had my final interview at the center yesterday. Eleanor set down her water bottle, leaning forward with interest. And? Rosa's smile bloomed full and bright. I start next week. Full benefits, just like you said. She laughed, the sound carrying across the lakefront. I never thought I'd be running after-school programs, but working with the children during the trial period felt so right. The kids already love you, Maya added. I heard Jeremy from my art class asking when Miss Rosa would be back to tell more stories. You're going to be amazing, Danny said warmly. Those kids need someone like you. Someone who understands what it's like to need a safe place to land. Rosa's eyes grew misty. It feels like a dream sometimes, she admitted, watching Tommy return to his kite. Having real work, being able to help others, not having to hide anymore. She laughed again, and this time it carried all the joy of her newfound freedom. And the center. It feels like home already. The spring sunlight danced across the lake, catching the silver band on Eleanor's finger as she reached over to squeeze Rosa's hand. Around them, the park buzzed with the simple pleasure of a perfect spring day. Children's laughter, the rustle of new leaves, and the steady rhythm of waves against the shore. Tommy's kite dipped and soared against the blue sky, its tail streaming like a banner of victory, while Maya's pencil moved across her paper, capturing this moment of pure contentment for all of them to remember. The afternoon sun mellowed into golden light as the picnic wound down. Empty containers that once held Eleanor's homemade sandwiches and Rosa's tamales lay scattered on the checkered blanket. Maya had moved to sit with Tommy near the water's edge, showing him how to skip stones across the lake's surface. Danny and Eleanor sat side by side on the blanket, their shoulders touching. His weathered hand held hers gently, his thumb tracing absent circles on her palm. The simple silver band on her finger caught the light, making Eleanor smile every time she noticed it. Look at them, Eleanor said softly, watching Tommy jump with excitement as one of Maya's stones skipped 4 times before sinking. Who would have thought a few months ago that we'd be here like this? Danny squeezed her hand. Sometimes the best things come from the hardest battles. He paused, watching Rosa approach her son with a juice box. Rosa starts her new job at the center on Monday. Full benefits, fair pay, and no more hiding, Eleanor added, her voice warm with satisfaction. The mentorship program is already helping 3 other families get their paperwork sorted out. A gentle breeze rustled through the lakeside trees, carrying the sound of Tommy's laughter as he attempted his own stone skipping. Maya stood behind him, adjusting his arm position with patient instruction. Maya's really bloomed these past few months, Danny said proudly. Remember how shy she was at the first gala? Now look at her, teaching, mentoring. She's talking about art therapy programs for the summer session. Eleanor leaned closer, fitting perfectly against his side. She's not the only one who's bloomed. You're not the same man who walked into my office with a found ring and an apology in his eyes. Well, you're not the same woman who sat behind that big desk either, Danny replied with a soft chuckle. Though I have to admit, I like you better in jeans than power suits. Is that so? Eleanor's eyes crinkled with amusement. And here I thought you were impressed by my corporate credentials. Nah. Danny shook his head, his expression growing serious. I was impressed by the preacher's daughter who still quoted Psalm 27 when things got tough, the one who chose doing right over doing easy. They watched as Tommy successfully skipped a stone twice, his victory whoop echoing across the water. Rosa clapped, her face bright with pride and peace. So different from the frightened woman who had whispered her truth in Pastor Ruth's kitchen months ago. "We make a good team, you know," Eleanor said after a moment. "You with your practical wisdom, me with my resources. Both of us too stubborn to back down when it matters." Danny turned to face her fully, his eyes holding that steady warmth that had first captured her heart decades ago. "Is that what we are? A team?" "Well," Eleanor's lips curved upward, "I'd say we're a bit more than that." The late afternoon light painted everything in soft gold, from the rippling lake water to Maya's dark hair as she demonstrated another perfect stone skip. Tommy's kite danced above them, a bright splash of blue against the deepening sky. Danny shifted, taking both of Eleanor's hands in his. His voice was quiet but sure. "Let's spend the rest of our courage together." Eleanor's heart swelled with quiet joy as she leaned her head against his shoulder, watching the kite dip and soar over the glittering lake. What would you do if you were in their place? Comment your answer below, and let's see how you'd rewrite the ending. If you thought this was just the beginning, you're right. Click through and see where the story takes you next. If you enjoyed the story of Danny Brooks, I handpicked the next story that you will enjoy. Please don't miss this one. Click here to watch it.